Hello, I'm Alan Kohler, founder of Eureka Report, which is now part of Intelligent Investor, finance presenter and columnist for the ABC.
And I'm James Thomson, senior Chanticleer columnist at the Australian Financial Review.
And we are
The Money Café.
G'day, James.
Hello, Alan. How are you?
Good to see you. Now, the first question for you is, and I'm really interested in this, is the AI summit that the Financial Review had. And you went to it with the idea of finding out what are you going to tell your 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So what did you tell your 16-year-old?
Start using these tools as much as you can, as many of them as you can. Just get as proficient in this as you can.
At using AI?
At using AI.
And
do not wait. Do not think you can outlast it or outwit it or beat it. You just need to be as good at it as you can be.
How do you be good at AI? What does that mean?
I think you have an understanding of, you're using the tools to do research. You're using the tools to, all sorts of great things. You can use tools to help you do like quizzes and stuff like that. So, you can use it in your education process to study and learn. Use them to play around with,
You mean to write stuff for you and pretend that it's yours?
No, the head of Google in Australia, Melanie Silver, had this great thing where she said, my daughter's using an AI tutor. So, it gets a subject and it gives you, say, a range of quizzes and tests. And it takes you through them. You answer the questions and then it says, oh, you got that wrong. Let's go back and have a look. I mean, how smart's that?
Wow.
It's a great idea. Simple idea, but a great idea. And so I think just being immersed in all this stuff, understanding its limitations, understanding that the answer you get might not be right, that's what I mean. Just jump into it.
So did any of the speakers at the AI Summit talk about what jobs won't be disrupted by AI?
Yeah, there's a woman called Leal Yarsley who's got an AI company. She's been doing this for 20 years. She had a great point. And she was like, this is the change. This is a bigger change as when we went from an agrarian economy in the 1800s to an industrial economy. Back then, 95% of us use muscle in some way to farm or whatever. Now, when we work, 95% of us use our brains. That's what AI is trying to replace. Cognition. And so
but it's all we got left, mate.
Her view is that's what it's coming for. It's coming for our brains. It's coming for our jobs. And so, I mean, look, that's at the doomer end of the scale. But Matt Common, CEO of Commonwealth Bank, he's saying the speed of development here is way off the charts. We do not understand it in Australia. We are risk averse when it comes to AI. We don't trust it. We don't think its benefits are going to outweigh the risks. So we are starting from a really bad point. His view is that the government needs to sort this, get on top of this.
What does that mean?
Well, what policy? Every policy's got to have a view to how's this going to improve productivity, so we can get ahead of AI. How lots of countries are now investing in AI as quickly as possible. Are we doing that? I don't see any evidence of that. Are we launching big programs to reskill and retrain workers? I don't see any evidence of that. And so he's saying this is coming in 4 to 7 years was his estimate. 4 to 7 years. That is.
I was really interested.
That's nothing in government terms.
I was interested to see that one of the speakers, I can't remember which one, said that one job that people should learn is coding. I thought that was going to get replaced.
Well, that was the chief scientist, Tony Haymet, and he said, look, no one ever regrets having those foundational skills. That was his point. Like, no one has ever said to him...
Yeah, but you won't get a job.
No, but you'll understand how it all works still. So I take your point. The interesting thing I heard, Google talks about this idea of vibe coding, which is where you now, to your point, the coding through AI is so good. You can sort of just tell the AI, I'm trying to do this, this, and this on a website or in an app, and it'll just make it for you. Like, the level of change here is absolutely staggering, and that's what I came away from. Like,
I've been thinking the one thing to tell your 16-year-old in terms of what's the job that's not going to be taken by AI is sport.
Maybe.
No, but, look, pick a sport, get really good at it, whether it's golf or tennis or AFL or whatever, cricket, and AI can't do that.
Yeah, true. You can go down the and you can go down the sort of dystopian rabbit hole though a bit, Alan. If AI's job is to reduce the cost of everything, right? With some things, the marginal cost is going to fall to very close to zero, right? So there's going to be no jobs in those areas because who's going to pay for that stuff?
Yeah.
Now, if you follow that through, if lots of things in the economy have no value, then who's going to pay for the professional sportsmen? Who's going to pay to be able to go and watch the professional golfers? Who's going to pay for anything?
Oh, I see. Oh, well, Christ.
Look, I mean, and I know that's very
That is a dystopian
That's as
rabbit hole, that
dystopian
is.
as it gets. But it's sort
So,
of
because we're all...
it's sort of worth thinking about.
We're all sitting at home with open fires because we haven't got any money.
Well, we're not sitting at home. We would have had to sell the home when we lost our job. I mean,
so where are we sitting, James?
I don't know. Like, you start thinking this through, and I'm sure, because history says we always find a way to muddle through, right? And that's what I keep coming back to as my sort of, North Star. We always find a way to muddle through this stuff. But I just think this is different for two reasons. It's hitting everything at once, and the speed is incredible.
I do think that just bringing up the analogy with the agrarian to industrial revolution that took place 200 years ago or whatever, it did take like 100 years to muddle through.
That's exactly right. And even the electrification. The US economy, it took 45 years for 25% of the US economy to be electrified. But that's not happening here. It's going to be here within 5 years.
Yes.
But we do not have a generation to get ready.
I think one thing the government should do is ban AI robots looking like human beings.
Right.
I think that'll be really confusing. If they have like plastic skin and they look exactly like a human being, and we end up with Blade Runner,
Yeah.
and replicants,
Yep.
right? I don't think that's going to be great. I think I've been watching Mandalorian,
Right, okay.
the Star Wars series,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
there's lots of robots in there,
Yep.
but none of them look like human beings. And I don't know I don't know why that is, but they don't. They look. There's droids that have got arms and legs, but they don't look anything like human beings.
Yep.
And then there's your R2D2 type things getting around on wheels, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
You want you want to be wheeled around. You want our overlords to be on wheels rather than legs.
No, I just want them not to look like me. I think that'd be very confusing.
You are irreplaceable, and
No, okay, all right. But look, all right.
But look, I think this is, it's easy to sort of hear this stuff and go, whatever, nothing to do with me. But the thing I took out of this is it is something to do with everyone. We are not talking enough about it. And, I wrote this column last week. The CEO of Anthropic, one of the big AI producers, says unemployment could rise to 20%. Now, you might go, what a doomsayer. This is one of the guys working with the tech.
Yeah.
And even if he's... the question we should ask is not, what a lose. We should be asking, what if he's right? Or even what if he's half right?
Or what will unemployment go to?
Yeah.
What I mean,
is it 10%? Is it 5%? Like, we need to get on top of this.
Let's move on. Now, speaking of Commonwealth Bank, which you raised, it's gone above 300
yep. $1 billion market cap.
300 billion. So, all right. And this is largely because of passive investing, right? So, the indexes is 11.8% of the index now.
Yes.
Which means all the ETFs just have to keep buying it as it goes up. But
as flows come into the ETFs, they have to keep buying it. Yep.
That's right. So the flows come in. So does this mean, do you think, that basically it doesn't stop ever rising?
I don't. That's a great question. I hadn't thought of that.
I mean,
I don't know. Yeah. Well,
because my sense has been, at some point the leverage must work in reverse, right? That as the money flows out, the ETFs have to sell, and it'll fall even faster, and so on. But actually, it's about the flows into super and the ETFs.
Yeah.
So, and the flows aren't going to stop.
Yeah.
Unless the flows go into something else, which Christ knows what. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great question, Alan. I hadn't thought of it that way. I don't know. I don't think it's a sign of a really healthy market. Everything's flowing into one company that is actually... Martin Curry, the fund manager, had some great numbers on this. It's actually fairly illiquid. It's not the stock's not turning over that much because everyone needs to keep holding it.
Yeah.
And so we've got this sort of concentration in the Australian market, which feels a little bit unhealthy to me. I mean, the one thing I would say is, aren't we lucky that all this money's pouring, all our eggs are going into a basket that is a bank that is extraordinarily well capitalised, extraordinarily well run, and is basically a bet on the Australian economy.
But it's also extraordinarily overvalued. I mean, on an objective...
I don't think that matters to these to passive investors.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely doesn't matter. So, But until maybe it does.
Until maybe it does. But I'm with you. I don't know what the catalyst is.
No.
So it's a fascinating thing. But think of the active fund manager who's underweight CBA because they know it's fundamentally overvalued. What do they tell their clients? Oh, sorry, we underperformed the market by X%. Should have bought more CBA, and that makes the problem worse. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It's a bit of a circular thing at the moment.
Yes. We should talk about GDP. I don't know. What do you say about it? Really?
What do you say? Yeah.
It's basically the economy is stalled, really.
Yeah. Shock horror.
The economy's stalled.
Yeah.
So is it anyone's fault? Maybe. I mean, there's no real plan to what came out of the thing yesterday was productivity's slowing again.
Yep.
GDP per capita's in reverse again. So. There's no plan to really pick productivity up.
No.
I mean, Chalmers has been saying I've asked the Productivity Commission to come up with 5 reports.
Yeah,
in the second half
fix
of
it
this year. But the productivity gave him 72 recommendations 2 years ago in 2023. Right,
yeah.
It was the 5-yearly report. I mean, I said to him the other day that basically they're going to say the same thing again.
Yeah, or versions thereof. Yeah.
So anyway.
But I mean, and he's been talking about getting the private sector more involved. I don't see any great signs of that. The private sector's scared to invest at the moment because the world's so uncertain.
Yeah.
So it's it's another one of these intractable sort of circular problems.
And speaking of the uncertain world, Trump, I wrote for the ABC website on Monday that I think the taco trade is rubbish.
Yeah.
It's not true. I mean, the steel and aluminium tariffs coming on last night and actually taking effect last night tells us that he doesn't always chicken out. And, in fact, he may not even be running the place.
Oh, that's a big call. Who's running the place?
Well,
Stephen Moran. He's economic advisor, or Scott Bessent.
I think there's a little committee.
Not Howard Lutnick.
I think it's a junta.
A junta.
Is that how you say it? Is it a junta?
A junta? I don't know.
I think it's there's
a non-military junta.
Stephen Moran, Stephen Miller, Russell Vaught, Stephen Bessent, I guess, yes.
Scott,
Peter Navarro, and all these characters, they're running the show behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean...
I guess that happens in all presidencies. That's why you have a cabinet. But you don't think the Trump has the whip hand, so to speak.
I don't think actually the cabinet's running it either.
Right.
They're all idiots. They are. They're all maniacs. I don't know.
Well, look, it feels pretty uncertain, and Trump needs a win. He needs a win, I reckon. And I'm not sure this one big beautiful bill is the win.
No,
I mean, it's politically, it's extraordinarily clever. The tax cuts come front loaded. The spending cuts start in 4 years' time, when it'll either be hopefully someone else's problem, and let's hope the Constitution holds and it's not Trump still dealing with it. Anyway.
I asked because he keeps saying that he wants to deal with China. That one might be a win if he gets to deal with China.
Yeah, maybe.
So I asked ChatGPT last night what deal actually does he want?
Right. What did it say?
Well, I don't think nobody's got any idea. Like, what is the deal that he's trying to get out of China? It's not clear at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
No.
And the hard thing is, he might want to reduce the trade surplus with China. He might want China to reduce its trade surplus. But all the people in America, they want the cheap Chinese stuff to keep flowing.
Of course.
They don't want they don't want to be paying $5,000 for an iPhone? So, it's a good question.
I mean,
what is the deal?
Is he kind of trying to get China to say we're not going to export steel to you anymore?
Yeah. Right.
What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Or is he going to say we need you to give us more rare earths? Which, okay, but China's only too happy to give them plenty of rare earths.
Yeah.
Line up.
Yeah.
Buy as much as you like. Come on. Anyway, now before we get to this week's question, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Want to give your kids or grandkids a solid financial head start? Just $50 a week could grow into an $84,000 nest egg by the time they turn 18. Sounds good, right? But it does mean looking beyond traditional savings accounts, especially with rates falling. If you're ready to explore smarter, long-term investing strategies, InvestSmart has a free ebook that shows you how. It covers investment options, tax traps to avoid, choosing the right account structure, and even ways to get the kids involved. Ready to move beyond the piggy bank? Download your free copy today at investsmart.com.au/guides.
Okay, we've got a lot of good questions about the $3 million super outrage. Horror. And
don't worry about AI eating our entire economy.
Just
$3 million in super. That's where we need to worry.
Daniel Perslow from Independent Financial Planner Bruning Partners in West Leederville has helped us out, as usual.
Thank you, Daniel.
We've sent him with the questions. He's given us a bit of a hand. So we'll just rattle through, and the answers will be a combination of Daniel and us. The first one is from Chris. The new super tax. There has been a lot of talk about the proposed new super tax being at odds with the current tax system settings for taxing unrealised gains. This already occurs in certain situations with shares where they're gifted or if they vest from an employer scheme, and can occur with housing transfers. So it's not unprecedented. And I'm surprised this has not been discussed. Yeah, well, that's true. But those situations you talk about, Chris, represent a change of ownership. So the tax would apply even though there's been no... in the new one, the one that's proposed, is that there's a tax even if there's no change, or no transaction.
That's the best explanation of why unrealised gains is not great that I've heard. Well done, Alan.
There's no transaction.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Well, yeah, that's what it's about.
I would say, though, that when your land tax is calculated every year, there's also no transaction.
That's true.
That is done on unrealised
and
gains.
likewise rates, council rates.
Yeah.
So council rates are a tax on unrealised gains, effectively, and also, like as you say, land tax. Go ahead anyway.
All right. Ian says, can someone explain this? If someone's shares in their SMSF go up from 50 to 70 million bucks, it's the end of the world to tax that because something unrealised gains. If another someone's shares go up from 50 grand to 70 grand, the government, with the support of the AFR, Sky and all the rest, will reduce their pension, New Start or disability benefit because apparently they don't need the money.
That's interesting because, in a sense, what he's saying is the means test is a sort of a tax on unrealised gains, and I really think that that's an apt analogy because it what was I going to say? I can't remember now. It's quite an apt analogy.
It's a great point, Ian, and I think it just goes to this.
Oh,
idea.
That's right. It's an apt analogy because it's not a new tax on unrealised gains. What it is a reduction in the tax discount.
Yeah.
From to 30%.
Yeah, good point.
Alex says, I'm surprised at the interest and news coverage on the Super 3 million tax changes because, A, this affects such a small group of Australians, 0.5%. Surely, statistically, not many listeners will be in this group. 3 million is a lot to retire on. If you've got more than that, then you're likely not using this retirement just a vehicle for increased general wealth. Yes.
I think we could take that as a comment from Alex. I think that's a reasonable point. Monica says she enjoys our excellent podcast. I know that maximising concessional contributions is tax effective based on the figure that the government permits, 30 grand for this financial year. Is there a recommended percentage of one's earnings that should go into super as post-tax contributions on an annual basis, not tax deductible necessarily, just to improve one's retirement? Is there sort of a rough guide? All right, Daniel says the percentile is different the percentage is different for everyone, as it's a ratio between your income and your lifestyle cost, i.e. you're on 100k but comfortably live on 50k, the percentage you need to save is very different from the person whose lifestyle costs 90k. The most important thing you can understand is how much you actually do spend now, and then you can work out how much you need to save to get to that number by retirement. They used to say we needed to save 15% of the income we earn over our lifetime to retire with the same standard of living. But now that we're living longer, the number probably needs to be higher. Good answer, Daniel.
Yep. Sarah says there's lots of discussion about taxation of unrealised gains. No one's talking about the realised gains that are never taxed in superannuation once you hit retirement. I was initially against it, however, a superannuation accountant explained to me that there's no capital gains tax if assets are sold while the member is in the retirement phase. Someone with a self-managed fund could realise $1 million gain on a sale of a property and pay no tax so long as they're in their tax-free retirement phase. So to me, this policy seems fair as it closes the tax loophole that I'm sure many wealthy people with self-managed super funds would take advantage of. And, yep, that's pretty much correct, Sarah.
All right, Marshall says 2 questions regarding the new $3 million super tax. One, if there is someone out there who has $53 million in super, how do they get that much money in super in the first place, given we can only put $30,000 in roughly per year? 2, if they do have to pay tax on the unrealised gains, how are they going to do it? Let's say 10% of 53 million is 5.3 million. If you can't sell down what's in super to take out the unrealised gains and they don't have enough outside super, what would they do? Okay, so the answer to the first question of how you'd get to 53 million in super is massive investment growth. Simple. Second, Daniel reckons he believes members will be able to lodge a release authority allowing them to release an amount of superannuation to pay their tax from this new system. There's a similar process for people who pay Division 293 tax at the moment, and that would probably be similar.
Dimitri says, you speculated that the rise of AI will lead to more wealth taxes, presumably because there'll be fewer wage earners, wages or both. Maybe. If so, who is going to service the mortgages needed to help keep house prices at current levels? Daniel says the robots will need to borrow money for their homes too, you know.
But it's a great question, Dimitri.
Yes.
It's a great question. Think about I'm going all AI dystopian again, but if you think about what brings house prices down, unemployment. If AI comes and wipes out a certain amount of jobs, unemployment rises, will we see house prices finally come down? Is that the way we get to a bit more equilibrium in the housing market? Painful as it would be. Not sure, but it's an interesting thought.
Nothing else is bringing house prices down.
But Dimitri's right too. We've got all this huge amounts of debt. If our ability to service that debt is hindered by a sudden rise in unemployment through AI, we've got a problem.
Well, that's the other thing that happens when unemployment rises a lot is the banks go broke.
Yeah.
Well, because people can't service their mortgages.
Yeah. Interesting. I think we're done with the super tax questions.
We are.
Thank you for all those. We'll start with Gavin. Stephen Main rightly says that the Australian state should make more use of mineral royalties. But let's get one thing straight. Those imposts are definitely royalties, not taxes. If they were taxes, they'd be duties of excise in violation of Section 90 of the Constitution. Their legality depends critically on the fact they are an assertion of property rights, not an assertion of taxing power. I've seen it argued that such an impost may be a duty of excise and therefore a tax if it's based on the price of a refined product rather than a raw mineral. While this agreement may be criticised on economics grounds, the suggestion that it turns a royalty into a tax is palpable nonsense. By the same logic, one would conclude that copyright royalties based on book sales are not royalties, where in fact it is solely through property rights that authors are able to extract such payments. We'll take that as a comment, Gavin, I think.
Another comment, I think, is that Alan says, and I'm going to read this for reasons I'll explain in a minute. He says every year Demographia publishes the International Housing Affordability Index, as quoted in your episode last week, and every year Australian media uses it to say our housing market is the least affordable in the world.
Hey.
But if you actually read the report, it only assesses 8 countries: Australia, Canada, Hong Kong, Ireland, New Zealand, Singapore, United States and the United Kingdom. And it is no way representative. And it's difficult to get accurate world data, but he reckons we are actually far from the least affordable in the world, and Sydney's sitting at 100 on the list. Well, I took that data and I then updated it for this week's new house price data from
Cotality, which is the old core logic.
And I figured out that Sydney's the most unaffordable in the world.
Oh,
Now, they've jumped past Hong Kong. And yesterday I recorded a piece for Sunday Night's ABC
saying this. Right. So this is Alan on
So Alan's
violence.
shooting me down before I even appear on the telly.
Do you reckon you're right?
Well, it's true that it only looks at Australia, those 8 countries. But who, I want to know, is more, who is not included that is more expensive?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I mean, what could it be?
Not sure. Just stepping back, I mean, Alan says, this is a global problem is basically Alan's main point here. I think that's right. I saw a really interesting thing the other day that in America they're talking about a divide between anyone who owned a house before 2021 and anyone else is either you got in before 2021 or you're locked out. That's the dividing line because prices have gone so crazy since the pandemic. I think that's just it simplifies the concept for me. Like, that's the dividing line. Now, we have, around the world, generations of people who are just locked out of the market.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because house prices in Australia are rising again now, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's supposed to be unaffordable.
Yeah.
So how can something that's unaffordable rise in price? The answer is because it's becoming more affordable with interest rates coming down. And the affordability of a house has to do with interest rates, not some objective kind of judgment as to what the price is, because there's no price to earnings ratio with a house.
Sure.
So what makes people get locked out is the difficulty of getting a deposit.
Yes.
That's what the problem is.
Yeah, okay.
So it's really to do with access rather than affordability. And the only people who can get into the housing market are those who have already got a deposit already because their parents gave it to them.
Yeah, yeah.
Or some other way, but whatever. I mean, the time, Shane Oliver and a few others measure the time it takes to save for a deposit over time. And that has increased from 5 to 6 years to 12 years, roughly, doubled.
Yeah.
And 12 years is basically unaffordable. 12 years is too long. There's no point. You can't really do it.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to be, if you had to save for 5 or 6 years, everyone was able to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you started when you left university and you had a house by the time you were 30.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote a big piece in the Fin last weekend about the inheritocracy.
Yes.
Which is, the idea is that it's starting to be a big part of the rich list, but it's also starting to be a big part of broader society because, and a lot of it comes back to housing wealth. You just need someone to have housing wealth in your family to say on that ladder.
That's right.
It's going to be the dividing line.
Which entrenches inequality.
Exactly. And it'll, at some stage, add it to the list of things that'll blow up. Can we... I just want to do Reese's question, if that's okay. Stephen was talking about last week about whether health insurers should acquire hospitals and said, well, the US does it, so why not? And Reese says, as a person who's lived in the US and had the unfortunate experience of dealing with the US healthcare system, I cannot for the life of me understand why any other country would want to emulate it. It's an unmitigated disaster. And I am a relatively well-off professional who lives in New York and San Francisco with health insurance through my country. So what is it about the US healthcare system that we should emulate? I'm genuinely curious, as I can see Bupa trying to push its members into their wholly owned ecosystem, which can only be bad for patients, and no one seems worried about it. I think this is a really interesting question, and I sort of take, you can't argue with the horror stories that you hear out of the US healthcare system, but we do have an issue here where the sort of controls of private health, particularly, are all bit weird. We have the people who sets the amount, the top of the funnel, the amount of money that can come in is set by the government, which needs to get elected next year. And so their incentive is to keep private health premiums as low as possible. But what's happened is they've become so low as to become unrealistic compared to the costs of running the system and the costs of getting care.
Yeah.
So this is the problem, that there's no market signal. The markets, we're not being told, the true cost of healthcare is sort of being artificially constrained by the government. Even if that was shifted to be set by an independent expert, now it might mean that premiums have to go up, but it would mean that we're paying a sustainable amount of money to keep the system working and operating and avoiding that situation where we do move to these ecosystems. But we can't have it both ways. The cost of healthcare is going up, and it's another thing where we don't want to recognise that, like electricity.
So, my view that health funds ought to own hospitals is based to a large extent on the hospital in Kew.
Yeah.
Adeney Private, just to remind listeners that it's owned 51% by 42 doctors, 49% by Medibank Private. And they've made it so that anyone who goes to that hospital has no out-of-pockets. There's no... if you go there, it's entirely covered. Everything is covered. If you're a member of Medibank Private or Bupa, and they're signing up the other health funds as well. So you don't have to be just in Medibank Private or Medibank to have no out-of-pocket. So there's no... All the doctors have agreed that there's no extra charges. And the way it works, the reason that they're able to do this is because they've shortened the stays in the hospital. And people go home much sooner than they would normally in another hospital.
Yep.
And they're nursed and looked after at home. So the hospital, part of the deal that Medibank is providing is a bit of home care.
Yeah.
And that's much cheaper than people staying in hospital for 5 days instead of 2. So that's kind of, I mean, at least they've thought it through.
Yeah.
And they're working on some sort of cost reduction, which is to get people home. And they say that people much prefer to be home. They don't want to stay in hospital for 5 or 6 days after a knee replacement. They want to get home. And, so they're kind of making that happen.
But that model goes to my point, Alan. It reflects the actual cost of care because it's taking the amount of money and it's trying to reduce, by sending you home quicker, it's trying to reduce the overall envelope of cost, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you've got to recognise what the actual cost is. Otherwise, we're going to see more private hospitals go under. That's what we're going to get.
Such as Healthscope.
Exactly.
Which is interesting. Healthscope was I had lunch with somebody yesterday who bought Healthscope in the beginning. I think when it was IPO'd, made a fortune.
There you go.
The stock went through the roof, and then it collapsed.
Can I ask you one of these other questions? Because I'd love to hear your view on it. I wrote an article in the Fin Review on May 30, and where I raised the idea of an AI company CEO of a token tax, where companies would be taxed a percentage of the profits made from a role that is filled by humans now, but is replaced by AI, and that would help pay for the welfare of the unemployed. Interested to hear your thoughts on this concept.
That's just another way of taxing AI. I think that there's got to be a way found to tax non-human labour.
Yeah,
that's the problem. If labour is replaced, whether it's so obviously it's cognitive sort of non-manual labour. If it's replaced by a non-human, and we only tax humans, then that's the problem. So we've got to find a way of taxing the non-humans.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a reasonable way of doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, it was interesting because it came from the Anthropic CEO. So he's aware that we're going to have to do something. So
I've just finished. It's interesting because I've just finished reading for my book club the Odyssey by Homer.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the thing that really kind of one of the things that struck me about it was the amount of slaves in it.
Right.
Like slavery, slaves were just full. Life was just full of slaves. They had slaves everywhere. They were all doing all sorts of stuff. And so, and I was thinking, okay, that's interesting. What are we talking about? Slaves. These are unpaid labourers, right? People who are just fed, but not paid. And then you think, well, okay, this is like 750 BC.
Yes.
Slavery was an integral part of the human economy right up until the early 19th century, until slavery was finally abolished. So for the entire span of human history, the economy rested on slavery.
And now we're going back.
We're going back to slavery because we're going to have unpaid creatures that do the work.
There you go.
And all we have to do is feed them with energy, right?
And tax them.
Well, we've got to find a way to tax them.
Yeah.
So,
or tax the people who profit from them.
No, but it's interesting because the slaves in ancient Greece and Roman Empire and all that stuff, they couldn't be taxed because they weren't paid.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought. There you go. Homer on the Money Café podcast. Who says we're not well read?
Gabby says that my husband and I are considering a townhouse investment purchase in Brisbane, but are unsure if property will remain a good investment for Gen Y and other younger generations in the future. As Gen Y, we've watched Baby... What is Gen Y? What's Gen Y?
I think it's after Gen X, so it's probably...
XY. Gen Y refers to demographic cohort born between 81 and 96. Right,
okay, there you go. Just after me. Sadly.
Yeah, just after me too.
Come on, Boomer, keep reading.
As Gen Y, we've watched baby boomers have incredible success from the property market, but you have previously changed tone with more reluctance on housing future success, as well as mentioning that housing should go through a period of no gains. Our question is, will it? Every Australian playbook says to buy property. What should younger generation be investing in to have the same opportunities and success as Gen X baby boomers?
What a great question.
That's right. So I have been on about, and I've been saying this in speeches and saying, what we need in this country to make housing more affordable, we need housing to be about investment.
Yes.
For 20 years,
yes.
Right? It's got to be about investment for 20 years.
Well, Gabby doesn't want to hear that.
No, that's right. Nobody does. Nobody.
But to Gabby's point, will it be?
That's right. Will it be? And the answer is, it seems to me that the price of housing now is becoming a function entirely of interest rates.
Right.
And if interest rates go up, housing will fall. And if interest rates come down, as they're doing now, housing will go up. So everyone reckons that house prices are going to go up 5 or 6% this year. Well, Shane Oliver does, and everyone else, kind of all the other
broadly,
bulging foreign analysts say that it's 5 or 6%. Well, okay, there you go. That's not a bad return, I guess.
Yeah.
Plus, if you're an investor, plus rent 3%, you're making sort of maybe 8% return this year. So that's okay.
It's okay, yeah.
But when interest rates go up again, it won't be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, housing is kind of up to pussy's bow, as they say. It's kind of it is up to maximum.
You're at the top. You're buying at the top of the cycle.
You're buying at the top.
Yeah,
that's true, roughly. But there is a bit left in it because of interest rates coming down.
Yeah, and because there is at the for the next there's still 5 years of pent up demand of people who can't get into the market. So I think.
But it is also true that the immigration is coming down. The immigration we've had in the last couple of years won't continue.
Yeah, but there's so much demand stocked up.
I know.
So, it depends on you. It depends on so many things, Gabby. Your time. Is this something you're going to buy and hold for 10 years? What's your time horizon? What's your risk appetite? The long run history of super says you'll do 8% a year or something like that.
In super, that's right.
In super, and it's tax effective. So should you be thinking about putting more money in super before you go and buy investment property? I don't know. But I think I think Gabby is asking herself the right question.
Yeah, and the other problem with buying property as an investment is you've got to have tenants.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, Christ.
Yeah. And they
can't who you're going to get.
They can't be AI robots either.
No.
Anonymous says, why is the government constantly thinking about tax? Why aren't they ever considering some savings? This tax obsession is squandering the aspirations of hard-working people, and the constant change of rules is shattering saving structures that enable them to be self-reliant and not burdening the government that they've been supporting for decades.
Well, Pete Hegseth told Richard Marles the other day that he's got to put up defence spending to 3.5% of GDP. It's currently 2%, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's another $40 or $50 billion of defence spending. I mean, Albanese is saying, no, we're not going to do that. But there is certainly a lot of pressure to increase defence spending.
Totally.
But also they just can't reduce a lot of the spending.
Well, they can. I mean, they can, but there's going to be consequences. I mean, the people most affected by this $3 million super tax are also the people who are on part or full pensions and who are going to be costing the state a lot of money in healthcare and aged care.
Nobody with $3 million in tax is on a part pension, are they?
I don't know.
Come on, I don't think
I'm
so.
not.
I think once you're
I'm not sure, but
once you're on $3 million in super, you're out of the pension. I think.
fair enough. Well, you're certainly not out of the aged care and healthcare systems.
No.
And so, Anonymous is right. You know, we can stop spending, but we'll have to hit those big items hardest: aged care and healthcare, and the same cohort will be upset with that, and reasonably so, I guess. But it's exactly right. We've got some hard decisions coming up.
Yes.
They're getting harder.
Anna says, with the right to disconnect laws, I thought it would be a good idea to put into law a restriction on the amount of hours a worker has to spend in meetings. I find myself very unproductive when over half my working week is spent not producing any outputs, discussing them instead. When did we all decide to talk so much? Can I blame COVID? And when can the government ban Teams calls? Yeah, look, I'm with you, Anna.
Best question ever, Anna.
Yeah.
This podcast should have been an email, clearly, but
Well,
I agree with Anna. So many meetings in so many walks of life. Man, we just...
Yeah, but you've got to have meetings because you've got to talk to people for your
Sure.
Right?
But
but apparently, yeah. Look, I'm not in executive management anymore. But crikey, there used to be a lot of meetings even in my day, which was a long time ago.
It is interesting. Like, I mean, Anna's being a bit facetious, but the whole idea of work from home, I've often thought about. You know, companies try and muddle through about, is this productive, is it unproductive? No one ever does any studies. You know, we're all talk about productivity at the macro level. Nobody ever studies productivity at the micro level and tries to work it out. How many meetings are we doing?
Yeah.
I think we could all do a bit of a productivity audit in companies, in our own lives, and maybe that's a way to
quite often
start fixing things.
I was just thinking that it's interesting how often when I ring somebody, they'll answer the phone and say, I'm in a meeting. And they're actually in a meeting. That's true, but they're talking to me on the phone as well. So the meeting's not very productive.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, if they're talking to her on the phone.
It's time for a government ban. I think Anna's right.
Ban meetings.
Ban meetings.
But not this one.
Not this one, absolutely.
Righto. Okay, thanks everyone for listening to today's episode of The Money Café. I'll be back next week with Stephen Main. Send in your question to themoneycafe@eurekareport.com.au. Until then, I'm Alan Kohler, founder of Eureka Report and finance presenter and columnist for the ABC.
And I'm James Thomson, senior Chanticleer columnist of the Australian Financial Review.
See you soon.